7 techniques. That is all that separates an eyeliner look that ages you from one that genuinely lifts your whole face. Not a different eye shape, not younger skin. 7 specific ways of holding the pencil, placing the line, and thinking about your own eyelid that almost nobody ever teaches a woman over 60. Because every eyeliner tutorial on the internet was filmed on a 25-year-old's eyelid, and what works beautifully there can quietly work against you now. Look at your eyeliner from your very last photo. Does it look crisp and lifted, or does it look slightly smudged, slightly uneven, sitting a little heavier than you intended by the middle of the day? If you have ever finished your makeup feeling confident, only to catch a photo later and think that liner looks harsh, this video is for you. Today, I am walking you through the 7 best eyeliner techniques specifically for eyes that have softened, changed shape, and become a little more sensitive with age. And I am saving the single technique that changes everything about how the other 6 actually perform for the very end. Do not skip ahead because it changes the entire way you will apply every other tip on this list from tomorrow morning onward. Welcome back to Stylish 60 Plus, the channel where we talk honestly about what actually works for our faces at this stage of life instead of recycled advice built for a different eyelid than the one you actually have today. Let's start with technique number 1, the foundation every other technique on this list builds on top of. Technique 1, the tapered tight line. Most of us learn to line the eye with one continuous thickness the entire way across, the same width at the inner corner as at the outer corner. On an eyelid that has softened and become slightly more hooded with age, this even thickness does something unhelpful. It reads as heavy and flat rather than lifted and defined, because the eye no longer has the same amount of visible lid space to display it against. The tapered tight line solves this instantly. Starting at the inner corner, keep the line extremely thin, barely visible, right against the base of the lashes. As you move toward the center of the eye, allow the line to build very gradually in thickness, and only at the outer third does it reach its fullest width, finishing with a soft, slightly upturned flick that lifts rather than drops at the very end. This single shift in thickness, thin to thick, moving outward, does more to visually lift a hooded or softened eye than almost any other single change you can make to your entire routine. I think of a client named Patricia whenever I teach this technique because she had drawn the exact same, even uniform line since she was a teenager, and she told me she had genuinely never once considered varying the thickness across the length of her own eye. The very first time we tried the tapered version together, she said her eyes looked instantly more awake in the mirror, and she has used nothing else since. Here is the practical detail that makes this technique actually work day to day. Use a pencil with some give to it, never a hard, scratchy lead, and rest your elbow on a flat surface while you apply it rather than holding your arm up freehand, which gives you far steadier control as the line builds in thickness. Draw in small, short strokes rather than one long continuous sweep, connecting the tiny segments together once you are happy with the shape. This alone eliminates most of the shakiness that comes from trying to draw one perfect long line in a single motion, which becomes genuinely harder to do steadily as hands change with age, and nobody ever talks about that honestly enough. There is also a small matter of lighting that almost nobody mentions when teaching this technique, and it makes a genuine difference in how accurately you can judge your own progress. Apply your eyeliner in natural daylight whenever possible, near a window rather than under a single overhead bulb, because overhead lighting creates shadows that can make an even well-tapered line look uneven simply due to the angle the light is hitting your face from. If natural light is not available in your bathroom, a simple ring light positioned at eye level rather than above your head gives you a far more accurate picture of how the line will actually look to someone standing in front of you throughout the day. One more detail worth mentioning before we move to the next technique. Many women hold their mirror too close or too far away while lining their eyes, which distorts depth perception just enough to throw off the accuracy of a tapered line. A handheld mirror held at roughly the same distance you would naturally hold a book to read comfortably tends to give the most accurate sense of proportion. Close enough to see clearly, far enough to judge the whole eye shape at once, rather than just a magnified fragment of it. This first technique alone changes the entire shape of how your eye reads to anyone looking at you. But technique 2 solves a problem that happens in a completely different part of the eye, one that most women have never even considered adjusting. Technique 2, the skip the waterline rule. This is a small adjustment with a genuinely surprising amount of impact. The waterline is the thin strip of moist skin just inside your lash line, and for years many of us were taught that lining it in black creates a more dramatic, defined eye. On a mature eye, this almost always works against you. The waterline area tends to become slightly more sensitive with age, and lining it in a dark color visually shrinks the visible white of the eye, making the whole eye look smaller, more closed, and often a little irritated or watery by the end of the day, which reads as tired rather than defined from even a short conversational distance. Here is what to do instead. Simply leave the waterline alone entirely, or if you want a small amount of extra brightness there, use a soft nude or very light pink pencil instead of black. This single swap does the opposite of the dark version. It makes the white of the eye look brighter and more awake, and it makes the whole eye appear larger rather than smaller, all without adding a single extra step to your existing routine. Technique 3, the pencil swap. If you have used the same liquid liner with a sharp, precise felt tip for years, here is something worth reconsidering. Liquid liner demands remarkably steady, dry, taut skin to glide across cleanly, and as eyelid skin naturally becomes thinner, slightly less taut, and a touch more textured with age, that same liquid formula can drag, skip, or settle unevenly into tiny creases as you apply it, creating a slightly jagged line that takes real effort to correct. A soft kohl or gel pencil, warmed gently between your fingers for a few seconds before application, glides across changing skin texture with far more forgiveness. It also gives you the ability to soften and smudge the lines slightly with a small brush immediately after application, which liquid liner simply does not allow once it sets. I want to mention a client named Eleanor here, because she had used the exact same liquid pen for 15 years out of habit, telling me she assumed a shaky hand meant she was simply losing her ability to apply makeup well. The moment we switched her to a soft pencil, her line came out smooth, and even on the very first try, and the shakiness she had blamed on herself disappeared entirely, because it was never really about her hand. It was about the tool fighting against skin that had quietly changed underneath it. One additional detail on this pencil swap that matters more than people expect. Keep your pencil sharpened to a rounded rather than a needle-sharp point. A rounded tip glides more gently and produces a softer, more forgiving line, while an overly sharp point can catch on delicate eyelid skin and create small skips or tugging that neither feels comfortable nor looks smooth in the final result. There is also a small preparation step worth adding before either of these two techniques, and it takes only a few extra seconds. Pat a very light layer of translucent powder or a specifically formulated eye primer across the lid before lining, focusing especially on the area right along the lash line. This gives the pencil something slightly drier and grippier to hold on to, which extends how long the line stays put throughout the day and reduces the chance of any transfer into the small creases that tend to form at the outer corner as the day goes on. Skipping this step is one of the quieter reasons a perfectly applied morning liner can look smudged and tired by early afternoon, even when every technique was done correctly the first time. And a final thought on color depth for these two techniques specifically. A pencil that goes on too sheer requires multiple passes to build the same depth a single pass of liquid liner achieves, and each additional pass increases the chance of dragging across softened skin. Look for a pencil description that specifically mentions intense, richly pigmented, or one-swipe color payoff, since these formulas let you achieve a full, defined line with a single gentle pass rather than several repeated ones. Technique 4, the soft smudge, and here is the backwards reveal that surprises almost every woman the first time she hears it. Most of us assume that a crisp, sharply defined liner line looks more polished and put together than a soft, diffused one. On younger, tauter eyelid skin, a crisp line absolutely can look striking. But on a softened, mature eyelid, a completely hard, precise edge often does the opposite of what you want. It draws attention directly to the exact spot where the lid meets the crease, a spot that has naturally changed shape over the years, and a razor-sharp line there can emphasize that change rather than distract from it. A softly smudged line, taken just a few millimeters up and out with a small brush immediately after application, does something remarkable instead. It creates a gentle gradient rather than one hard edge, and gradients are far more forgiving to any surface, including skin, because they blur the transition between color and skin rather than announcing exactly where one stops and the other begins. This is the exact same principle a photographer uses when softening a hard shadow line in a portrait. Soft edges red is more youthful, hard edges red is more severe. To do this well, apply your liner as usual using the tapered technique from earlier. Then, while the product is still slightly workable, take a small tapered smudge brush and gently push the very top edge of the line upward and outward in short, feathery motions, blending it just slightly into the crease area rather than leaving one hard stopping point. You want softness at the edge, not smearing across the whole lid. A light touch here makes an enormous difference between looking smoky and polished versus looking simply smudged by accident. Technique 5, the lift and line trick. And this one solves a problem specific to eyes that have developed some degree of hooding, where a small fold of skin partially covers part of the lash line when the eyes are open. Trying to line directly through that fold, with the eye in its natural resting position, often results in a line that appears crooked or partially hidden once the eye opens fully, because you were drawing onto skin that was folded differently than how it settles at rest. The fix is simple and takes just a few extra seconds. Gently place one or two fingers at the outer corner of your eye and lift the hooded fold upward and slightly outward, just enough to expose the full lash line clearly. Then apply your liner directly against the roots of the lashes while holding that gentle lift. Release your fingers slowly once the line is complete, and check the result with your eyes fully open in a mirror before adding any additional layers. I have watched this small technique transform frustrating, uneven eyeliner mornings into a completely different experience for women who had genuinely started to believe they had simply lost the ability to apply liner cleanly as they aged. The truth was never about ability. It was about drawing on the correct surface in the first place. Something almost no tutorial ever explains because it assumes every eyelid behaves exactly the same way when you are looking straight into a mirror. A small variation on this lift and line trick that many women find even easier. Instead of lifting with your own fingers, which requires holding a steady position with one hand while lining with the other, try tilting your head back very slightly and looking downward into a mirror positioned below your normal eye level. This naturally stretches the hooded fold upward using gravity alone, freeing up both hands and often producing an even steadier result than the finger lift version, particularly for anyone who finds holding a lifted position for several seconds a little tiring on the hand and wrist. It is also worth mentioning that these two techniques, the soft smudge and the lift and line trick, work beautifully together rather than as separate alternatives. Many women in my chair use the lift and line method to get the initial placement correct, then release their fingers and immediately follow with the soft smudge technique to soften the top edge once the eye has returned to its natural resting position. Used together, this combination handles both the placement challenge and the visual softness challenge in a single quick routine that takes barely any additional time once it becomes familiar. Technique 6, the dot and connect method. And this is genuinely one of the most requested techniques from women in my chair who have started to notice their hands are simply not as steady as they used to be during fine, detailed tasks. This is an enormously common and completely normal change, and it has absolutely nothing to do with skill or ability. Trying to draw one long, continuous line across the entire lash line in a single unbroken motion requires a very specific kind of fine motor control that becomes genuinely harder to maintain steadily over a longer stroke as we age, and fighting against that reality with the exact same old technique only leads to frustration. The dot and connect method removes that difficulty almost entirely. Instead of attempting one continuous sweep, place a series of small, closely spaced dots directly along the lash line, working from the inner corner outward, using short, controlled, single taps of the pencil rather than a dragging motion. Each individual dot requires only a tiny, easily controlled movement rather than a long, sustained one. Once your dots are placed, go back and connect them together with small, gentle strokes, filling in the tiny gaps between each dot rather than trying to draw the whole line freshly in one pass. This technique gives you multiple small opportunities to correct and adjust as you go, rather than committing to one long line that either works or does not. It is also considerably faster to fix a single small gap between two dots than to erase and redo an entire line that went slightly off course partway through. I want to share something a client named Barbara told me after we practiced this together for the first time. She had genuinely stopped wearing eyeliner altogether for nearly 2 years, telling herself she had simply lost the hand for it, and it had quietly become one small thing she felt she had given up as she got older. Watching her relearn the dot and connect method and produce a clean, even line again, using the exact same pencil she already owned, was one of the more meaningful moments I have had in this chair because it was never really about giving something up. It was about nobody ever showing her a technique built for the hands she actually has today. A small additional tip that makes this method even easier. Use a pencil rather than a liquid formula for this technique specifically, since a pencil forgives slight unevenness in dot placement far more naturally than liquid liner does. And it allows you to soften and blend any remaining texture with the smudge technique we covered earlier in this video. If you find that even small dots feel difficult to control some mornings, there is no shame at all in resting the side of your pinky finger gently against your cheekbone while applying each dot, using it as a small anchor point the same way an artist braces a hand against a canvas for detailed work. This tiny bit of extra stability often makes a bigger difference than people expect, and it costs nothing and requires no special tool at all. I also want to mention timing, because it matters more than people realize with this particular technique. Attempting any detailed handwork first thing in the morning, before your hands have had a chance to warm up and settle from sleep, tends to be harder for almost everyone regardless of age. If mornings are consistently more difficult, try doing your eyeliner after breakfast and a warm cup of coffee or tea rather than as the very first task of your day, giving your hands a little time to feel steadier before attempting the more detailed parts of your routine. It is worth saying plainly, because so few beauty tutorials ever do, that a naturally steadier or shakier hand on any given morning has nothing to do with how well you will look by the time you walk out the door, only with which technique on this list you reach for that day. Some mornings, the tapered tightline will feel effortless. Other mornings, the dot and connect method will simply be the kinder, more realistic choice. And reaching for it is not a compromise or a step backward. It is simply working with the day you actually have in front of you, rather than the day you think you are supposed to have. We have covered 6 techniques so far: the tapered tightline, the skip the waterline rule, the pencil swap, the soft smudge, the lift and line trick, and the dot and connect method. Technique 7 is the one I promised you at the very beginning of this video, the one that changes how every single technique we just covered actually performs once you're out the door and living your day: the color swap. Here is the reveal that surprises almost every woman the first time she really considers it. Black is not automatically the most flattering eyeliner color simply because it is the most common one. Black creates the strongest possible contrast against the skin. And while strong contrast can look striking and dramatic, it also draws the most attention to every single detail in that exact area, including any texture, unevenness, or unintended smudging that occurs throughout the day. A softer color, specifically a rich, warm brown, a deep plum, or a soft charcoal gray, creates definition without the same harsh contrast, which means minor imperfections that would be immediately visible in black become almost invisible in a softer tone, and the overall look reads as considerably softer and more youthful even when the technique underneath is identical. I think of a client named Susan whenever I recommend this final swap, because she had worn the exact same black liner for over 30 years and was initially quite resistant to changing it, telling me black felt like the only color that actually counted as eyeliner. We tried a deep warm brown together as an experiment, using all 6 of the techniques we had already practiced that day. And when she looked in the mirror, she said her eyes looked softer and somehow more like her own natural eye color, rather than like something drawn on top of them. She has not gone back to black since, and she now owns both, choosing brown for daytime and reserving black only for special evenings when she wants that extra bit of drama. Here is a small additional detail worth knowing. If your eyes are blue or green, a warm chocolate brown liner intensifies your natural eye color beautifully, because warm brown sits in contrast to cool eye tones. If your eyes are brown, a deep plum or aubergine liner brings out warm golden flecks in the iris that black tends to flatten and mute instead. Either way, the softer color choice does the same essential job black always did, defining and shaping the eye, but it does it with a gentleness that works with mature skin rather than against it. Put all 7 of these techniques together, and you have a complete approach to eyeliner built specifically for the eyes you actually have today, not the eyes a tutorial assumed you still had. The tapered line lifts. The bare waterline brightens. The soft pencil forgives. The gentle smudge softens. The lift and line trick solves hooding. The dot and connect method restores control. And the color swap ties every single piece together into something that reads as effortless, rather than drawn on. None of these 7 techniques require an expensive new product, and most of you already own everything you need sitting in a drawer right now. They simply require a small shift in how you think about your own eye, replacing a technique that once worked beautifully with one built for the eye looking back at you in the mirror today. If you only take one thing away from this entire video, let it be this. There was never anything wrong with your hand, your eyesight, or your ability. Every single struggle we talked about today came from applying a technique designed for a different eyelid onto the one you actually have now, and every single fix was simply a small adjustment in thinking rather than a dramatic overhaul of your entire routine. That distinction matters because it means confidence with eyeliner was never something you lost. It was only ever waiting for the right technique to meet it again. So tell me, out of these 7 techniques, which one are you trying first thing tomorrow morning? And which one do you think will make the biggest difference for you? I read every single comment, and I would love to know.